are again, guys, live with another Q&A. Bring on the questions. This is kind of surprise again. This is unscheduled. So I just want to share a little bit how what my ideas are for these Q&As and how I'd like to do it. Right now I'm just seeing how this goes again, unscheduled. I'd really like to see a lot of people on asking questions. But at the same time, I'm trying to find out what to do with the Patreon page. So one of the best things to do right now seems to be to put the times for the live videos and Q&As on Patreon. So for like $2 a month, something like that, you'll know exactly when they are. And I'd like to do them, you know, at least minimum twice a month. But right now, I'm pretty happy to do them much more often than that. So that's it. Bring on the questions and let's get this started. What do you guys want to talk about? We can talk about technique. We can talk about specific musical things too. Hi, Barbara. Tu vas continuer les tutoriels sur pathétique. Tu peux répondre en anglais si tu veux. Merci, Sharif. Yeah, I think so. I'm going to continue the tutorials on pathétique. There's so much to say in there. Thanks for bringing that up. I'll definitely be doing more of that. Rachmaninoff symphonic dances for two pianos. Have you ever considered playing? I played the other two, the two suites for two pianos. That was a heck of a lot of fun. Symphonic dances I'm not familiar with at all, but the suites for two pianos, boy, that's great. The thing with two pianos is you always have to find a good location to be able to perform that has two good pianos, which is hard enough most of the time to just find one. But there's places that you can do it. So yeah, that's kind of hasn't been on my chamber list priorities. Although June 15th is a festival in Montreal. We're doing eight hands, 4 pianos with 4 pianists. That's going to be fun. We're going to do all kinds of crazy things. Can you play Sonata Moon? I'm guessing you're saying the Moonlight Sonata. Yeah, you know, can just play it. We can talk about it. That might be more interesting. Maybe we'll get back to that in a minute. How to practice polyrhythms like 5/6 oder 7, 7 und 6. Those are tough. Yeah, 5 and 6. Someone had, I think this comes from Zachar Braun. He would say with 5, the quintuplets. Rimsky-Korsakov, Rimsky-Korsakov, which is actually, it's kind of funny, but that's been helping me recently. 7 and 6 is really hard. I would go about the same way. Let's say you have the metronome. Hope there's enough battery in this metronome. I just hate this metronome, actually. Okay, here we go. So let's just get, jeez, okay, here we are. We're going to put the metronome at, let's say, 60. Let's see if maybe 80. Yeah, 60 is going to be good. Yeah, I don't have enough battery in this. I'll do that later, but you need to find your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. And then alternate between that and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. And then start doing those at the same time. That's a little bit... That might be easier than trying to find out exactly which notes fall in between what. We'd need a metronome to do that. Maybe we can go on with that next time. Can you talk a bit, hold on. Do you theoretically analyze your pieces? Absolutely. The question is when, you know? Some people like to analyze everything like right from the start. I kind of like, I'm just so excited to play the music. I just play it and kind of do it as I go along. Um, you can get a lot out of your analysis of the music. I did my doctorate on this actually, on how what we get out of doing analysis of the music. It's really important to have a structural analysis, to have a good, clear structural idea of what's going on in the music. So structural analysis is, for example, understanding the form. So, you know, maybe A, B, A, that's the big form. And then let's say in your A section, so the first section, you know, where how many bars do you have per phrase? And then you keep on segmenting to shorter and shorter sections. So for example, you have an 8-bar phrase that has 4 parts, or sometimes you have like weird numbers in Chopin, like 5-bar phrases and 7-bar phrases. So then you have inside the 4 bars, you have, you know, 2 plus 2 most of the time. Or you have like 2 small things and then a longer one. Often something's repeated 3 times and the 3rd time it's longer. That kind of analysis is very important. Then you have the harmonic analysis, which is a bit more, that one requires a bit more academic knowledge, I would say. But that's also really useful to understand exactly where the composer is going. The composers don't know always, there's many different ways of going about the harmonic analysis. There's things that they understand very well, obviously, like circle of fifths, you know. But there's some things that it's just a way that they're expressing the tonal language and kind of stretching it more and more, like you see with Chopin and Liszt doing this a lot. So I don't know if they're to what point they knew it the way we would analyze music harmonically today. But for sure they knew about, you know, circle of fifths and 5 of 4 and stuff like that, you know. So that can help a lot. Also knowing, for example, like let's say at the end of a piece you have a pedal. Like let's say at the end, let's say we're in C major. So it's interesting to know that those notes, these are ornamental notes in the bass. And then you're having different harmonies here. 5 of 4, 4, and then 5. C that doesn't belong in the chord in the bass. It can add a lot to know these things. So yes, I theoretically analyze my pieces as much as makes me happy. Going back, can you talk a bit about practicing Brahms Intermezzi Opus 118 number 1? 118 number 1. That's I don't have the scores to those right now. I'd have to get the scores a little bit, but it's funny, I was just looking at that the other day. That would be fun to talk about. I guess I would have to do a video on it. Number 1 and 2, yeah. One of the interesting things about that is the way he transitions into the second one. So I don't even remember the key. But anyway, it leads into it from the end of the first one. So maybe that's just one thing we can say about it, but we'd have to do a video about that. I'd actually like to learn all those intermezzi. There's a very nice new recording with Volodos who plays those. The last one is just beautiful. But there's a very nice transition you can do. You know, it's kind of like going to dying and going to heaven. At the end of that number 1, and then number 2, you're in a completely different atmosphere. So try to prepare the atmosphere of the second one by the end of the first one. I wish I had the music also. We could look at it a bit more in depth, but that's something I have to pick up. Let's go on here. I play the Ocean Etude from Chopin. I didn't know that was called the Ocean Etude. Interesting. Opus 25, number 12, and my arms get really tired at the end. Do you have any solution? If your arms are getting tired, most likely you're tensing up somewhere. Let's find this. Let's pull this out for a minute. See what we can briefly talk about in that. Opus 25, number 12. Well, you know, I think I talked about this in a video. There's really no reason to get tired in this if you're relaxed. When you're transferring the weight, try to transfer the weight. You have to feel it transfer. But chances are, this is tight. So you always have to check and make sure that you're not tight here and locked here in your hand, or you're going to get very tired, which is likely the case if you're playing like this. I don't know if you can see very well the tightness in my hands when I'm doing this. It's very different than this. So I would spend as much time as possible working on relaxing the arm and inside the hand, and then making sure that you're transferring the weight by using the wheel. So this is always, you know, up in the left hand, going up, and down in the left hand, going down, and the opposite for the right hand. So if you're not familiar with the wheel, just check out some of the videos I put up on the wheel. But you definitely have some tightness in the arm if you're getting tired in this. Wheel is not very tiring. Rotation can be a lot more tiring. What is the craziest piece you've ever had to perform? I would say the craziest piece I ever had to perform was about a year ago. It's a composer here. Her name is Massicotte. And, oh man, it's called Portrait Parle. Portrait, in French, P-O-R-T-R-A-I-T, Parle, P-A-R-L-E. And you can find that actually on YouTube. There's a recording. I'm not sure how good that recording is, but it's just crazy, the effects. And at some point you have to go play inside the piano, and I had to put scores inside the piano because the rhythm is just constantly like crazy, like those 7 versus 6 kind of rhythms and things like that. That was pretty crazy. Debussy Ballade. No, I haven't played that. I don't know that. My favorite Rachmaninoff piece. There's a lot of them. The preludes are really beautiful. There's a lot of, I love the sonata. Maybe that's one of my favorite ones, the sonata number 2. That is so exciting. I haven't really worked on it seriously. And I mean, obviously the concertos, it's hard to say, you know, Rock 3. I played Concerto 2, 3, and 4, and some of the first one, but the 4th one was one of my favorites. That is a beautiful, beautiful concerto. Very underplayed, Rachmaninoff 4th Piano Concerto. Anatoly Liadov. No, I haven't heard of him. That's not Liapunov. Liadov, don't know him. I listened also, Joel, to the Czerny Opus 740, I think you were talking about. There's a couple of really, really fun ones. In particular, you know, in book 1, the 2nd one, and the 6th one, I think. Something like that. And there's another one, I think the last one with rotation in the left hand. Those are really cool. Those were some of my favorite ones in there. Very good to learn. The chromatic progression on the 3rd page of Chopin Nocturne, Opus 55, number 1. How would you go about learning, practicing this? Maybe we can look at that briefly here. If I can find the nocturnes amidst the mess of scores here. Here we go. Opus 55. You said Opus 55, number 1? And you guys go ahead and ask more questions so we have more things to work with. Okay, what was the specifics this? The chromatic progression on the 3rd page. Let's see if we have the same pages. You're talking about this? Is that it? I'm not sure about specifically where you're talking about. I don't know if that's it. Yeah, I don't know where specifically you're talking about, Joel. Chromatic progression. Yeah, if you, I don't have bar numbers either, so that's in this edition. Ah, I think you mean yeah, that must be it. How would you go about practicing that? Well, I haven't played this in ages. Well, first it depends what your problem is, you know. But I mean, I would obviously look at the rotation. And then maybe try to put some form and structure to it. You know, how can you? Let's see what comes to mind here. I guess I would have to look at it a little bit because I never learned this nocturne, so I might just say anything right now, but it depends what your problem is also with this, you know. You have these two chromatic lines, one on the top going down, and the other one coming up, and then it comes back down, and then so that's kind of a little bit of a hint of how you can group it and structure it. Probably, again, I would have to look at it a little bit longer, but it seems like, you know, we obviously have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and then we come back 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's could be like 2 things and then a longer thing. Is that possible? I'm not sure exactly how to structure that, but obviously look at the rotation, you know, and then if you can be more specific with what the problem is, then we can go into more details of that. Is there a composer that I hate? Is there a composer that I hate? You know, not really. The only thing I hate, sometimes, you know, when playing chamber music, there's certain composers that, you know, didn't really write for piano, but there's like arrangements and things for piano. Those are not my favorite things to play, you know, arrangements and stuff like that. But I don't know if there's any composer that I hate. No one really comes to mind in that. Not really. What advice do you have for an intermediate piano player who struggles with passage work through practicing hard? Is there a breakthrough after a while, or should correct practice produce quick results? Struggling with passage work through practicing hard. Correct practice. Right. I'm trying to understand exactly what your problem is. Struggling with passages, you know, what practicing hard, what do you mean by your practice? What it sounds like is you're practicing hard and you're not getting the results that you want with like difficult passages. That's kind of what I understand, Matthias. For sure, there's an effective way of practicing. You know, if you're going fast all the time, for example, and repeating the same mistakes over and over, that's a big disservice. one of the things we usually do is repeat things until we get it right, which is a problem because we've played it wrong like 50 times, and then we get it right once and we stop there and then expect that, you know, when we play it for our teacher or next time that we should have it, and then we end up repeating the same mistakes. So this is a really important thing in general for everyone in your practice, is to, once you get it right, finally, that's the beginning. Then you have to be able to get it right like 5 times in a row and work on very small sections, and always work on a small section. Maybe it's a bar, maybe it's half a bar or 2 bars or something like that. And then you have to be able to put it in context. So what happens is you work on, like, let's say it's 1 bar where you make the same mistake over and over. Then you work on it and repeat it over until you get it right. Then you repeat it so you have it right, like, you know, five times out of 5, or at least 9 times out of 10. Then you have to start a little bit before, maybe the bar before, and be able to get through that and still be able to do it. So you're putting it a bit more in context and be able to play what's after it. Obviously, you might have to adjust the tempo a little bit. And then you gradually, you know, you're not going to repeat that like, you know, 20 times. It's going to take too much of your time. But, you know, if you're able to do that like 3, 4, 5 times, repeating a little bit before, then that's really good. Then you probably repeat it from like the whole page. And you find that every time you add more around the problematic part, you make the same mistake again, because it's a question of concentration and being able to plug your work back into the context. So then you just have to repeat it again in the context of, let's say, the whole page 2 or 3 times, and eventually you're doing that with the whole piece. You want to be able to play from start to finish, but you start out by just working on a small section. I hope that answers your question. If there's a more specific problem, then just write in exactly what that is. Nina says, I have not been able to gain control in my 4th and 5th fingers after a year of consistent playing. Especially the 5th finger seems to be almost uncooperative. Is that normal for the 4th finger? Sorry, is that normal for beginners? Well, that's really normal. The 4th finger is one of the weakest fingers if you're working with a finger. But something to consider also is working less with the fingers and actually finding ways to connect things with your arm. The 4th finger is the weakest finger when you're doing this. But if you're doing this, right? So an example here is in rotation. Let me come down a little bit. If I'm doing this, now I'm not using the finger anymore. So this is using the finger, but this is, so it depends on the context. But if you have something that's zigzagging up and down between notes, you want to be using this, playing this with your arm. So again, it's not with the elbow like this, it's just this part. It'll feel like you're twisting in the wrist, but there's actually muscles in the arm that are working to do this. So yes, there's a 4th and 5th fingers, they're not very strong. So, you know, if you're doing something like this, let's say you have an arpeggio, you find that this is very weak. One of the things that's making it weak is that you're relying so much on using the fingers to play it instead of connecting like this. See, now I'm not pushing with the 4, but I'm using the arm to bring the 4th finger to play. So this is what we're calling the wheel. So when you're doing the wheel, you should always be watching to see how little of this movement you can be doing and more of this, bringing the fingers with the arm to connect it. And then obviously, you know, you need to have the right fingering and stuff like that. If you're doing a scale, it's the same thing. You know, it's not just the fingers. Now I'm doing it with the fingers. Now I'm using the arm. Not only is it easier, it sounds better, it's more connected to what you're doing. So that's very important. You're bringing the notes, transferring the weight. We have to talk a lot about transferring the weight. This is very important stuff, transferring weight. Okay, we got lots of questions now. This is great. How can I ensure that I'm not playing from memory when trying to sight read harder pieces? I seem to have trouble with automatically memorizing parts that I'm reading. Well, that's a high quality problem. If you memorize really fast, that's great. Uh, well, you can sight read things that you don't know, that you've never heard before. That's a lot harder. That's a challenge. But I mean, obviously, you can't play something by memory if you haven't heard it. So, maybe that's a problem, that you hear something and you automatically know how to play it without reading the music. In which case you have a very good ear, which is to your advantage. Ensure that I'm not playing from memory. I mean, when you're sight reading things, usually it's something you haven't played before. So, yeah, like, I don't know how you're memorizing something you haven't played, unless it's something you play from time to time and you just have a really excellent memory. Then you need to sight read new stuff all the time. Keep sight reading things that you haven't heard, or that you haven't played before. Maybe you've heard it, but you haven't played it before. Just keep looking at new things all the time. And if that's easy for you and you're already doing that, then you must have pretty good sight reading. What do you think about the music of Pierre Boulez? I haven't listened to him so much. Everyone tells me I should. So, yeah. I appreciate contemporary music, but it's, I play it quite regularly, and it's never my favorite thing to play, but I usually get into it. I end up getting into it quite a bit. So, especially when it's good. I mean, he was obviously a master. Have you heard Chopin's Scherzo Number 1? It's a great piece. Yeah, it is a great piece. Maybe not the best of those 4 scherzos, but yeah, it is very nice. The theme in the middle of that scherzo is actually a Polish Christmas song. You know that, can't remember what key it's in. That's actually a Polish famous thing. They all know it over there. I am currently practicing Bach chorales for sight reading practice by myself without a tutor. It is okay for now, but I'm afraid that I develop bad fingering. Is this possible? I am a beginner. Bach chorales, that's very nice. Very nice. Yeah, I mean, it's possible you develop bad fingering. It is good to have a tutor. I found that people who are self-taught, they tend to have a lot of bad habits that are kind of hard to get rid of after they've done for a long time. So, I wouldn't stop. I wouldn't let it discourage you. It's great that you're doing it even without a tutor. Bad fingerings, yeah, tutor will definitely help, but it's also going to help to look at different pieces. You can self-teach yourself quite a bit. So, even with the fingerings that are in your books and different editions, even though they're not always the best, at least they're, I had my teacher in Vienna would often refer to teachers being for invalids, fingerings being for invalids because they were so bad, but they're still going to be like relatively okay. So you can self-teach yourself quite a bit if you're, let's say, vigilant about learning fingerings and interested in it. Just be interested in it and look at different pieces, by different composers, not just Bach chorales, and using books that have fingerings in them. That'll probably spill into your sight reading. And, it's okay. It's not the end of the world if every here and there you're doing bad fingerings. It's not going to turn you into a bad pianist, but if you're aware of it, that's good. Because we all do that sometimes, do some fingerings that are not so good. So it's just something you have to look at a little bit, and yeah, maybe consider, having a tutor from time to time, or, having a Skype lesson or something with someone, or just to look at fingerings a little bit. Can you show how you practice these devilish trills by Bach? Well, maybe give a specific example so we know what we're talking about. Is there an easy way? Let's just talk about trills a little bit. You can use 2/4 for trills. You can use 3/5 sometimes is a very good fingering for trills that people usually don't. Beginners won't look at that very much. 3/5. What am I saying? Is it 3/5? I say 2/3 is the most common. 2/4. 2/4 is a very good trill finger. 1/3, maybe that's the one. 1/3. 2/4 is kind of good for a static trill that you're not doing much of a crescendo in. So that's 2/3. You have a bit more power in there than 2/4. You can also think a little bit of how you're using a little bit of rotation in your trill, not only relying on the fingers. That's really tough, but when you add the rotation in there, you can do a bit more. Some of the problems we have with trills a lot of the times is we end up doing them faster than necessary, even very professional pianists. So sometimes it's just a question of slowing the trill down because it doesn't need to be so fast. 1/3 is a good trill fingering. I said 3/5. 3/5 is practical if you have things like things like that, you know, where you have something else going on with the thumb. 1/4, 1/3, 2/3, 2/4, 3/5. We said 1/3, 1/4. We don't use that very much. Yeah, that's about it. Do you have any good exercises for relaxed hands? Been playing for about 4 years, but been stuck on how to practice this. That's always a problem, having relaxed hands. You know, I think you have to be just really vigilant with this. There's the hands, there's the fingers and the arms, and there's also the shoulders. So, you know, if you do stuff like yoga, that's going to help because, you know, we're talking about the hands and we're talking about the arms, and sometimes your arm is tight because you had some knot here. I mean, yoga, okay, we're talking about a lot of things. I'm talking about hatha yoga and not like acrobatic, really gymnastic kind of workout stuff, more just like listening to your body, or even if you have a massage, you know, or do any kind of work that makes you feel your body and feel what you're feeling and learn to, you know, undo knots in any way. It might affect a lot of things going on, you know, because sometimes we have a tendency to be tight in the shoulders. It can affect tightness in the arm. You know, if you're having pain in your arm, it can sometimes be because of pain in your heel or your la cheville, you know, what do we call this? The ankle. But in your hands, I think you just have to like pay attention to it on a consistent basis. If you just think about it from time to time, it's not going to be enough. You have to really think about it a lot. You know, we talked about this last time in this. So, and for the fingers, you know, there's this exercise, it's on the channel, it's called Independence of Fingers by Horowitz. It was an exercise that Horowitz gave one of his students, you know, where you do this sort of thing. This is good for having the independence of fingers, which they have to be relaxed in order to do. So I would recommend that exercise. You might find that relaxes your hand quite a bit, because when you're really tight, these things become really hard to do. So you'll find the more that you relax while doing this becomes quite easy. So check out that video. It's called Exercise for Independence of Fingers by Horowitz. It's on my channel. Yeah, there. Someone mentioned it also in the comments. That's very good. I've been working a lot with arm motion, rotation, etc. wheel, but the fingers must also have a role. They move. Yes, they do move. And that seems to be the part I'm less sure about. Yeah, that's a question everyone has, you know, like, don't the fingers move? You know, you're doing the rotation and stuff. Yeah, they move. They move especially to go on to the next key. You have to really look a lot at this. You know, often what happens is it takes weeks, months actually, to learn rotation. You know, I'm working on this with a particular student right now, and doing this rotation, you'll keep coming back to doing this with your finger. So when you're doing rotation, no, you're not using the finger at all. You're doing this. There's zero finger. When you're doing the wheel, you're using the fingers to move on to the right key. Can't do that one. Let's try this one. Let's say we take this. So of course I have to place my finger with my hand on the right key, and it's always already there, touching the key. And then the rotation is doing the work. You know, so if you're doing this, there should be none of this going on with the thumb. It's just happening with this movement. And you have to pay really attention to the elbow, because you're going to want to do it like this, and that's not right. It's just this. It's like opening a doorknob. Extend your arm and try it. With the wheel, we're trying to minimize the finger work as much as possible, because that's not helping us transfer the weight. The fingers are moving to go onto the keys, but we're using the wheel in these patterns. So there's very little happening with the fingers, you know. Even when you're coming down, it looks like they're moving, but the movement isn't coming from the finger. It's more inside the hand, and the arm is doing this. The arm is bringing this, and bringing the wrist down. That's making this possible. So we're connecting. When you're moving with this, you have the most disconnected movement that you can possibly have, you know. And then when you do this, that's not very good either, but obviously there's more of your body that's working to play. Then when you're using the arm to play and doing this wheel and stuff like that, now you're connecting it to everything, because the arm, that's connected to the shoulder, connected to the back. So you're basically putting more of yourself in the instrument. All right, we got a lot of questions here. I sight read from music lesson books that have fingering notation, so I learn good fingering as I read. Yeah, you know, that's a good place to start. If you have no tutor, then do that. That's good. And then eventually, you know, they're not always the best fingerings, and there's a lot of possibilities with fingerings. The octave trills in the third movement of Beethoven Waldstein Sonata. Do you have any suggestion on this? You mentioned using the arm, but I think this is counter. The octave trills? No. Octave trills in the third movement. Where is that? I'd have to pull that out again. There's only 3 movements in that sonata, right? I'm not sure anyway. But if you have octave trills, you have something like this. So again, that's just rotation, you know. You have to work on this kind of movement. So there's a few things you can do. A, get your rotation, master your rotation. You know, look at the videos on it so you know it very well. Extend your arm when you're not sure you're doing it right. And do this like you're opening a doorknob. It's really important to do this, guys. Extend your arm out and do this movement, because if you're doing this with your elbow, you're screwed. This is not it. So this kind of just, you can even put your hand on the elbow, the bone here, to make sure that stays, that does not move. There's nothing moving here. You know, it shouldn't be going like this. You're not twisting this. It's just twisting here. It feels like you're twisting on the wrist. Then when you have that, then bend the arm and stay there, you know. So keep your hand here, and it should feel the same. There's nothing going on here. None of this stuff. We don't want this. Just this. Then come come to the piano and do the same thing you were doing here with your doorknob. You know, you're just putting the hand like this instead of like this. So with the doorknob, you make like a claw and you go like this. And then just stay inside the keys as much as possible. Because if you're going like this, you can do this to try to, you know, figure out that rotation. That's probably in the left hand. I'm not sure where it is there. And then eventually, you want to stay on the keys. And because the rotation can get really tiring, stay inside the keys. Try practicing this without even letting the keys come up completely. That should help a lot. Do I teach via Skype? How much sense does teaching without physical presence make, in your opinion? Well, you know, I've been teaching over Skype, yes. Obviously, you know, being physically there is the best thing, I find. But so far, it's going pretty well. You know, it helps if you have a good, you know, angle, you're able to get the camera on the piano. You know, the better microphones we have, the better it is as well. You know, I had a Blue Yeti which I returned because I was having so much problem with it, and I have to get another one and switch that right now. You know, nothing beats being in person, but it's surprising how much we can actually do over Skype. So far, that's going pretty well. Could you make a video for sight reading such as intervals and stuff like that? Sight reading such as intervals. I'm not sure I understand your question, Zana. Tools for sight reading such as intervals. Maybe recognizing intervals on paper. You know, I think sight reading, you just have to do it, do as much as possible, or do it every day. Just make it a regular thing, and you know, these things make more and more sense. If you're interested in intervals, I guess look a bit at the theory, which you probably already are if you're asking about it. I mean, I think you know how that works. You know what a third looks like. You know what a fourth looks like. And the more you read the music, that's why sight reading is so good. The more you're able to recognize those things, recognize those chords, you know, when it's this, when it's this. You're able to recognize a sixth very quickly. Obviously, a sixth, you have one note on the line, one in the space. You know, the fifth, they're both, you know, on the space or both on the line. The fourth, you have one on the line, one on the space. You just have to keep sight reading on a regular basis. Sight read as much as you can. Rotation for trills. Yeah, I think we've already talked about that. Whoops. Okay. Come back. What's going on? Sorry, guys. I don't know where this is anymore. I'm kind of... don't know what happened here. We're still on. I'm kind of I don't know. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, rotation for trills. Yeah, I think we've looked at that quite a bit. So, hi Alfonso. I heard your channel. Also heard some Brahms third violin sonata. Was playing that recently. Sounds great. Yeah, rotation for trills. I think, you know, I remember Mark, my former teacher, was saying he learned to trill properly when his hand was in some kind of cast and he couldn't move the fingers, so he was doing this only with rotation. I find a little bit of finger helps, but you put both. Use a little bit of finger and a little bit of rotation, and that helps a lot for the trills. Again, also, if you have octave trills, no fingers at all. What do you think is the easiest Chopin ballade I want to get I want to get into them, but not sure where to start. The easiest Chopin ballad? Definitely not the fourth. The second one is not so bad, you know. The second one is not so hard. You have some of that drawer technique near the end. I guess 1, 2, 3. Between those ones, people usually start with the first one. They like that more than the second one. Although the second one is really cool. The fourth one is the hardest anyway. Don't start with the fourth one, but either, you know, either 1, 2, or 3. I'm trying to remember how hard is 3. Is that harder than number 1? I spent a bit more time looking at the scherzos, but yeah, definitely don't start with the fourth one. Just, you know, maybe take what you're most inspired with. I think they're kind of similar difficulty. 1, 2, and 3. I tend to find 3, the second one, to be a little bit easier. You know, the beginning is not so hard, and then when you have those, I can't remember what key again, but the middle section there, it's not so bad. It's not as hard as some things that you might have to do in the third ballade, although the end is a little bit harder. Okay, Bear Fox Wolf says, thanks. At present, I have almost passive fingers, so I'm looking at the other side. Okay, that's usually it's the opposite. Like, don't the fingers also move, and how do they? Yeah, maybe focus mostly on how the fingers are moving to get placed on the right keys. That's very important. I suppose, okay, if we're going to get really technical, one of the things the fingers also do, when we do this, this is the grip. So you have both this movement going in with the rotation and the wheel, especially in this case, but there's also a little mild movement with the fingers while the arm is going in to do this, that's pulling towards you. I'd probably have to make a video on that because I've talked about it very little, and I don't want to confuse people with that too much because we'd really have to go into that one. But focus mostly on placing the fingers in the right place. Okay, we're going to end soon. Do you have any tips on playing chromatic scales with 3, 4, 5, like Etude, Opus 10, number 2? Yeah, that really requires a... I find the more relaxed the hand is, again, you know, if you can get there, where this is really, I'm exaggerating a little bit, you do need a tiny little bit of firmness. It is very tough thing to do, but the more relaxed this is, you know, and feel like you're relaxed, but you're walking from one key to the next, you know. So again, that's transferring the weight, you know. So the 4, the weight is on the 4. This is short, and then you're walking. It's like you're walking the fingers. Then you feel the weight transfer in a very relaxed way. I saw someone teach this also like this. So you can do that. That's an interesting thing. You can also do just the thumb and then just the 2. That's a good way to practice that. Okay, a couple more questions. Trill in Schubert Impromptu, Opus 142, number 2. Which one is that? Schubert Impromptu, Opus 142, number 2. Let me see if I have that here. I'd have to find that. I'm not sure which impromptu that is. So, but we've talked quite a bit about trills. I'd have to take that one out and find it. My Waldstein question was associated with 1-2 trill in G and A, with the right hand playing a melody an octave with the same hand. So your index and thumb are trilling while the pinky is stretching to play the melody. Oh, that's great. Isn't that like at the end of Opus 109? How does that go? Okay, for these kind of trills, I can't remember where that is in the Waldstein, but I'm not even know if I'm in the right key with this, but go in a little bit when you have the octave, you know, so you're trilling and then go in, you know, you can't see very well out there. I'll do if I do it down here. So you're going forward this way to play the 5, and then eventually it's not so much like that much, because then you're losing a lot of time, but more like just a little hit from the arm. That should help a lot for those things. Okay, one more question here. Have you had students with exceptionally large fingers and hands leading to bad fluency and clumpy playing? Yeah, everyone's hands are different. I have one student who has like a crooked second finger. So, you know, and it's very hard to play like, let's say a D, you know, that's between 2 black keys and a chord. That can be a challenge, you know. You have to, in that case, see if you can come out a little bit, but not everyone's hand is flexible enough to be able to do something like this, where it's no longer, that second finger is no longer between the 2 black keys. So sometimes you have to change the fingering around. We have to always be open to doing a completely different fingering, or rearranging the piece a little bit, maybe even leaving some notes out if that makes it better. Okay, last question here. What do you do when you're getting burnt out on a piece? I always think last question, doing one more. When I'm getting burnt out on a piece, I take a break. You know, if you're first of all, if you're burnt out like physically, then that's not good. You know, you're gonna hurt yourself. But if you're burnt out like you're just sick of playing something, take a break, for God's sakes, you know. And if you take a break, if you've been practicing something a lot for like 3 days or more, let's say you've been practicing something more than 3 days, I would say, if you've been practicing every day for a week or more, and then you take 3 days off, or even just 2 days off, you come back feeling so refreshed, because you become so technical and you forget all about the music, and the music is connected to everything you're doing, the technique, and so, you know, it's easier to play when you're being musical. So I would take a break when I'm feeling that way. All right, guys, we got to end this one now. So we'll have another live feed coming up soon. What I'm going to do is, I said at the beginning of the video, I'm going to be putting the times up on Patreon. So that's going to be a new thing. We'll see how that goes. You know, that hopefully I'm trying to attract more people on Patreon. You know, get some funding to you know, get better equipment here and do better things. Eventually, obviously, I would love to have a better piano and a studio and a space to do this sort of stuff that would be more appropriate. So that's the plan right now. That's what I'm planning to do, is put the times up on Patreon. So for like $2 a month, you're gonna know when they are, if you want to know when. And if not, then, just stay tuned, and you'll probably see me on here sometime, and catch the live feed. Thanks for joining. I'm happy this has helped. Seems to have helped a lot of you. It's been a pleasure. So happy practicing. Take care.